Good Friday afternoon to you. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, Kevan Arnold will join us. We'll talk some Browns, and we will begin by talking plenty of Browns with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. A mandatory weekend off for the players. Then it goes into game week, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Browns getting ready for week one against the Kansas City Chiefs. Still some big questions. Kevin Stefanski talked about how that new-look Browns defense will line up in week one, and who exactly is going to be the starters.
I think we know who our starters are today, Tony, but I would say we'll wait till next week to really finalize what we're going to look like going into Kansas City.
Does that have to do with game plan or the competition itself?
I'd say a little bit of both. You know, I know we have to set that depth chart, and we will, but at the end of the day, we'll play a lot of guys. We really will. We'll wave guys in, especially on the defensive front. So we'll work through all that next week.
Let's welcome in Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And Dan, when you hear that, might not be as big of a deal who starts because there's a lot of depth on this defense now.
Yeah, it's kind of the old basketball saying, right? It's not who starts, it's who finishes. I think the Browns are going to do a lot of mixing and matching, like Kevin Stefanski said. That defensive line, I'm really fascinated to see how aggressively they sub guys in and roll guys in and out, because Joe Woods was saying, you know, week to week, they could go really fast or they could go really big. And I just wonder how much they'll do that, you know, even within games. And you have a guy like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah who can, you know, maybe you don't want him on the field right now for like 60 snaps, but if you can find 20 to 30 snaps where he can make a really big impact, that's important. So I think that's really what the Browns are going to seek with some of these younger players and some of these guys they've added as depth pieces throughout the offseason.
Now, Kevin Stefanski, as we figured, didn't want to tip his hand as to who's going to start. Who do you think you see out there when the game begins with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes on the other side of the line?
I really think at corner we're going to see Greg Newsome. I've sensed that really from the minute camp started, and I know Greedy Williams was getting a lot of those first team reps, and when Denzel Ward was out, it was Greedy that kind of moved up to that number one, but I just don't know that was really indicative of anything. So I think at corner we're going to see Greedy Williams. I think we'll probably see Andrew Billings and Malik Jackson in the middle, but Malik McDowell will certainly get some opportunities. Jordan Elliott will get some opportunities. Linebackers the most fascinating. Anthony Walker will start at Mike, but will JOK start on the outside, or will it be Mac Wilson? Will Sione Takitaki, who was back on the field, be that starting outside linebacker next to Anthony Walker? I think that's interesting. At safety, I'm looking at Ronnie Harrison getting the start. I just don't know if they want to push it too hard with Grant Delpit, especially considering he's come back already once and then had to go back on the bikes for a while. So I would imagine Ronnie Harrison is going to be the guy that plays the lion's share of the snaps at safety next to John Johnson. But again, we're going to see Delpit plenty. And look, I think we'll see Greedy Delpit plenty, or Greedy Williams plenty as well. But I would expect Greg Newsome to be the starter on that second corner.
When you look at that line, this might be one of those instances where they need to play fast. When you think about Tyreek Hill, you think about Patrick Mahomes, and you think about Travis Kelce. They, being the Browns front office, upgraded the speed for teams like they're facing in week one.
Yeah, exactly. And so much of it comes down to how Patrick Mahomes plays. You know, we talk so much about quarterbacks that get the ball out and, you know, spread the ball around. Mahomes is not afraid to take those deep drops. He probably drops deeper than any quarterback in the NFL. He's not afraid to move around. He holds the ball a long time because he knows he can get it down the field. He trusts his arm strength. And that's where having fast guys like Garrett and Clowney and Tack McKinley, you know, Malik McDowell, really big in the middle, just having all those guys that can kind of chase him around and not let him find a spot. And when he does take those deep drops, you know, maybe you can force him to move up in the pocket. And that's where a Malik Jackson could kind of clean things up a little bit. So, you know, you're right. They might not admit it, but they've certainly built this team to try and beat Kansas City, but also to beat, you know, the Bills with Josh Allen, the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. But I have to believe a lot of what they did this offseason had to do with the team they played last season.
How concerned are you that we haven't seen a lot of those defensive pieces on the field together, not only in preseason, but in camp itself? They haven't been able to take a lot of the team reps because of various, bangs and bruises and bumps, not necessarily major injuries, but they were kind of nagging things that kept them from working together.
I think it's a case-by-case basis. With Myles Garrett, if he's not out there doing team drills, if he's not playing in the preseason, you know what Myles Garrett is going to give you regardless. He doesn't need that work. You can even say the same with Jadeveon Clowney. You kind of know what Jadeveon Clowney is going to be. It's just about getting him healthy. But I do think it matters that Grant Delpit didn't get a lot of work this training camp, and he wasn't able to get on the field. I think he's a guy you wanted to see on the field every single time. I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, losing those days at the beginning of camp because he went on the COVID list, and then losing some other time as well with the incident he had in the weight room where he couldn't even put on his helmet afterwards because he had to get stitches. I do think that can set a rookie back. So it's really a case-by-case basis. Do you know what a guy can do? Has he done it for you before? Or, is this guy still kind of learning the ropes a little bit and you're not exactly sure how he fits? So that's sort of how I look at it person to person.
We've talked a little bit about Malik McDowell, and that's a guy that has looked really impressive. I mean, he's moving the line of scrimmage. Hadn't played in a number of years because of, his off-the-field issues, was in prison and well documented. You wrote an article about him and just kind of his mindset, and I've been impressed from what I have heard. He seems to understand. Take us through that article and what you found out as you were writing that.
We'd never gotten a chance to speak to him before he came up to the podium that day. And so we weren't honestly sure what we were going to get, how open he would be about his past and what he would say. And he answered every question, and he was very open about, why maybe some of those things happened, how he lost his way after the ATV accident before his first training camp in Seattle. And I just thought he was really honest about everything. And that to me just tells me this isn't a guy that stood up there and made excuses. He didn't blame other people. He said he felt like he let his mom down, which was the hardest part for him, but he really seemed to own all of his mistakes. And to me, that tells me this is a guy that understands, one, how to kind of get his life in order and what he needs to do, but also two, this is kind of his last chance. He hasn't played a football game since 2016, and this might be his last opportunity to play and maybe make the kind of money that his talent could allow him to make, because he is a big man, he is athletic, and even though he kind of laughed it off, I think he can play a little bit of defensive end if they want him to, and he can really cause some problems in the middle of that defense if he's the player Bucs thought they were getting when they picked him number 35 overall.
Yeah, and the other thing was he was very gracious and very happy and thankful that Andrew Berry was willing to give him another chance, which I thought, again, him coming out and saying that, he understood kind of where he was and that Andrew Berry stuck his neck out a little bit for him. Let's talk about this roster. What areas on this roster concern you?
Well, even though we just sat and praised Malik McDowell, I do think the depth on the defensive line is a little concerning, just because I think the ceiling on some of these guys is really high. But I also know there's some things we have to keep an eye on, right? Malik McDowell, like I said, hasn't played a real football game since 2016. So how is he going to hold up physically? Is he going to be able to step on the field right away and be up to NFL speed? He looked at it in the preseason in spots, but regular season and preseason are different. Takk McKinley is a guy that I love the role they have for him, sort of that third down edge rusher, put him out there and let him just speed rush after the quarterback. You're not counting on him to be your number two, but he's also a guy that has been in the league since 2017 and hasn't quite lived up to that first round pick status. So will the Browns unlock some of that? And Jadeveon Clowney as well is another guy that has had some injury history. He's coming off a year where he had an injury. He's never been a big sack number guy. I don't think they're expecting him to have 10 to 12 sacks this season, but is Jadeveon Clowney going to be able to stay healthy? So the ceiling on all of this is like sky high. These guys could be an absolutely dominant group of defensive linemen. But there is a sort of a floor there that can get a little bit low if these guys just don't quite become the players the Browns were hoping they would be.
Yeah, and the variance there is pretty significant. So it'll be really interesting, and that'll be something we keep an eye on. Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, who does Emmanuel Acho think is the biggest challenger, biggest problem for the Chiefs in the AFC? Also, what is the ceiling, what is the floor for the Browns this season as far as records go? Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns football with Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Dan Labbe. So Emmanuel Acho on FS1's or Fox Sports, Speak for Yourself. Why are the Browns the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC?
It's real simple, and don't let anybody complicate it for y'all. The Browns have a better roster than the Chiefs. The Chiefs have a better quarterback than the Browns. It's going to come down to, can the Chiefs quarterback outmatch the Browns roster? But the Browns offensive line is better than the Chiefs. Browns 2 running backs, better than the Chiefs. Browns skill position, I would say worse, obviously, but slightly worse. If Odell Beckham comes back healthy and a dude, Jarvis Landry, if he comes back a dude that he has been, then you could make an argument that obviously the Chiefs' skills are better, but the Browns' skills are still top flight. Browns corner defensive backs, not even just cornerbacks, between Johnson, Greedy Williams, my dog, number 4, slipping my name right now, the dude from Ohio State, who is a dog first-round pick. They got dudes. So as I look at it, didn't even mention Myles Garrett, Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Browns got a better roster. Chiefs got a better quarterback. Can Patrick Mahomes be greater than the sum of the Browns roster if and when they meet? That's the only question you got to answer.
And Dan Labbe, that's a really good way of breaking that down and putting it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of argument to make there. Starting with that offensive line, starting with those running backs, all those positions he mentioned, the Browns have a better group, and then the Chiefs just have a better quarterback, and that's not even an insult to Baker Mayfield. It's just Patrick Mahomes is, maybe going to go down when all is said and done as the second greatest quarterback of all time behind Brady. He's got that type of potential. So if you were to sit down and draft players from that Browns-Chiefs game, you'd obviously take Mahomes number 1, but then you might take 2 or 3 Browns before you take another Chief. It just depends how you feel about Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, some of those guys, how high you want to take them. But yes, the Browns roster is better overall than the Chiefs roster. I just don't think there's a debate to be had about that.
Yeah, and we touched on this yesterday. They're the 4th youngest roster in the NFL with 53, and they're really the only young one that people are talking about as a playoff team. So that's how good this roster can be and how long it can be sustained. All right, ESPN.com. Ceiling and floor for the Browns. They see the ceiling is 12-5, the floor is 8-9. Biggest variables: Mayfield-Beckham connection impacts the ceiling. Whether the defense can gel determines the floor. I think they have it flipped, but that's okay. I think the most important thing is how well that defense comes together.
Yeah, I think that's vital to how good this team can be. I would actually disagree that their ceiling is 12-5. I think that's actually been a fairly popular prediction. That was ultimately my prediction that I turned in. I think their ceiling is honestly contending for that number 1 seed in the AFC. If we're talking how good this football team can be, especially if they go out and beat Kansas City week 1, that just sets everything up for you to maybe make a run and be the best team in the AFC. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're going to get to 14-3 or even 15-2. But I do think, again, because of what we just said about this roster, and if Baker Mayfield does kind of become that guy, you do have to start talking about this team as maybe being a number 1 seed.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I was with you when I went through it. I kind of 12-5 I thought was legitimate. And you could talk me into 13 or 14 wins. I think, the only one that, and I'm saying Kansas City is a tough one to win. I'm saying Green Bay on Christmas night is going to be a tough one to win. I think they split with the Ravens. They may take 2 because they got the bye week in between. And really, the Patriots are going to be better. Other than that, there's nothing in that schedule that I'm going, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some potential speed bumps, the ones you mentioned. I think that game in LA against the Chargers could be tough if they live up to the potential they could have. But you don't look at any game and say there's no way the Browns win this game. Even that week 1 game against the Chiefs, even that Christmas Day game against the Packers. You don't look at any of those games and say, I just don't see a scenario where the Browns win this game. I think you can talk yourself into winning any game on this schedule. I'm kind of with you. I'm in agreement with you on a lot of those games, splitting with the Ravens. You lose to the Chiefs week 1. I don't have to go through it all like you did, but because you already did. But that's sort of how I came to that 12-5 number is I just think, this team doesn't have a game in front of them that you're just petrified of. They're that a roster.
Yeah, and we're kind of in agreement on the prediction it being 12-5. All right. NFL.com analysts voted on who was going to win the AFC North. 19 of them vote Browns win it. 9 vote Ravens, 1 votes the Steelers. So things kind of swayed towards the Browns. And keep in mind, J.K. Dobbins, who I think is one of the rising superstar running backs, done for the year for the Ravens. And I know they have other talented running backs. That will hurt Baltimore. That would hurt any team.
Yeah, and I heard someone say that Baltimore has, always produced, 1,000-yard rushers and had different leading rushers every year. But, Dobbins is just a little bit different. He unlocks a lot of things for Lamar Jackson, and he's a multifaceted player. And I do think they had big plans for him. So losing him for the year is a real blow to that team, even if a guy like Gus Edwards has a year like he had a few years ago. I think the Browns should be the favorite to win this division. I like the Ravens a lot. I think they're going to be a good football team. They know who they are. They're well coached. The Browns are sort of striving to be known as that, and I think they're going to get there very soon. But it kind of comes down to that 2-game stretch, right, where the Ravens have to go Browns, Pittsburgh Browns, and the Browns get to go Ravens, bye week Ravens. So certainly if they sweep that set, there's no way they don't win the AFC North. If they split, though, I'm still confident that the Browns can finish strong and win the division, especially because the Ravens' finishing schedule is pretty challenging, a little more challenging even than the Browns, even though the Browns still have the Packers left after that game. I don't know who voted for the Steelers. I don't know if it's a Steelers alum. Good for them. I disagree. I think this is a 2-horse race between the Browns and the Ravens.
And I think the Steelers will be better than maybe some Browns fans want to give them credit for. But I don't think I think they're a little bit below the Ravens and the Browns and trending in the opposite direction, if you will. Dan Labbe and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, let's find out what Dan thinks about the offense. We'll also try to figure out who has influenced Kevin Stefanski as a play caller. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. back to rushing to class, back to having questions, lots of questions, back to vending machine dinners, back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football with Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. So, Dan, what do you expect from this offense? Year two, Kevin Stefanski system, all of the guys back. Odell probably added back to the mix. What does this offense look like?
I think we're going to see a real step up in efficiency. And this was a very efficient offense last year, but I think they're going to take that next step. I think Baker Mayfield, we're going to see that completion percentage really consistently land in that 65 to 70% range, like we saw towards the end of last season. I do think this is going to be a more pass heavy team than people expect. That doesn't mean they're going to neglect Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, but I really do think the new way of thinking about offense in football is that passing, especially on early downs, is just a more efficient way to do things. And I think in an analytics-driven front office, a coach who buys into that way of thinking, and really based on the evidence we had over the last 6 weeks of the season, they're going to embrace passing the football early in games and passing on early downs. And that's actually going to help Nick Chubb. That's going to help Kareem Hunt because it's going to put defenses in positions where they don't have run defenses out on the field necessarily. They're spread out a little more. They've got lighter guys on the field, and the Browns are going to be able to take advantage of that in the run game, especially when they're protecting leads.
So Kevin Stefanski was asked who influenced him as a play caller, and who does he model his play calling after?
I'd upset somebody if I gave you one person. I mean that, Zach. I was so fortunate to be around different people, different philosophies, different personalities, different schemes. So I've tried to take everything from all those guys.
You told us about when you became the play caller. It was like, whoa, I mean, is it something you ever worked on before or envisioned, or was it just like this week I have to come up with a game plan?
Played quite a bit of Madden growing up. No, I think any coach, period, you're calling the plays with the play caller throughout the game. Hey, I would call that. I really like that call. I wouldn't call that. And I can't tell you how many times as a young coach I'd hear a play call come in and be like, ooh, I wouldn't call that. And then 1st and 10 or touchdown, So I think all of us, when you're not calling the plays, are in that rhythm thinking about what you might call next. I know for us, offensively, and even Joe defensively, I think it's really a really collaborative effort on game days. Ultimately, I'm making those calls, Joe's making that calls, but we have a lot of help along the way.
And Dan, he always makes sure that he tells everyone that it's not just him calling the plays. The offense last year, it made sense. You kind of understood, how they were getting from A to B to C to D, and that hadn't been the case the two previous renditions of this offense.
Right. And look, I think the one point you made there that I think is so important is we've had so many offensive coaches come through here that you think, you hear them talk about take victory laps when a play works, or, oh, look, I created a touchdown there. You just don't hear that from Kevin Stefanski. And the reality is he's probably the one guy who could sit up there and say, my design, my scheme created that touchdown or that first down. So I think that's a credit to him. You just go back and watch some of the things he does, the way he can manipulate motion and personnel groupings to, there's a play against Washington, I remember, where he managed to get a linebacker on Odell Beckham Jr., just using a certain personnel grouping and then motion. In the Kansas City game, there was the touchdown to Jarvis Landry, but if you watch it again, you see Donovan Peoples-Jones come out as a run blocker and play action and then release, and he was wide open over the middle. It's things like that you just notice. He's so good at hunting matchups, setting up receivers to be successful, making the run look like a pass and vice versa. It's based on what he said they're playing Madden. I guess it's a victory for all of us who spent way too much time playing video games when we were younger.
He learned well enough and can probably beat the computer now at that. So how involved do you think Odell Beckham Jr. will be in Kansas City? They kind of started incorporating him into the team drills later, the last few days. How big of a role does he have week one, do you think?
I think there'll still be a measure of caution, but I do feel like there's a comfort there that he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be able to play. Is it going to be, as many snaps as his normal workload? I don't know, because I think they still want to be careful. And I think, even though they'd never admit this, I think they're viewing this as a 17-game season, as they should. And 60 reps every game is a lot. And they don't want to put a lot of reps on guys early if they don't have to, because really, you want to be playing your best football after Thanksgiving, when that playoff race starts and you're getting into the postseason, hopefully, and trying to make a run. So you're not trying to play your best football on September 12th, even though you want to win that game. You're trying to play it after Thanksgiving. So if they have to still slow play Beckham a little bit, I think they will. But we are going to see him, and we're going to see him in situations where he can make an impact. And if it's not a full workload, I think it's going to be enough that you're going to notice his presence out there.
And you know what? I fully embrace the idea of a 17-game season is the way to look at it, as opposed to, boy, we got to get him out there against Kansas City. We got to beat the Chiefs on September 12th and, win September. The goals are a little loftier for the franchise right now.
Right. And look, it would be great to get off to a fast start. And even if they lose in Kansas City, they should, because you've got the Texans coming to town. You've got the Bears coming to town. But the reality is, we see it all the time. Teams start 2-2 or even, 3-4, whatever it is, 3-5 sometimes. And they're still able to turn that season around and make it to the playoffs. It's not what you want to do, but the last thing you want is to be playing your best football in September and October. And then when that playoff race really gets going, like I said, after Thanksgiving, you're kind of grinding and trying to figure things out. You want to build this so that you peak at the end of the year.
What are you most concerned with about the Chiefs matchup week one?
I think as cliche as it is, it's just those Chiefs weapons. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. Every team tries to stop those guys, and very few have been able to do it. We saw Tampa Bay. They were able to do it, and basically all it took was having, star players at every position on defense and having one of the best defenses in football across the board. So they're just a really difficult matchup offensively. And even when you think you've got everything figured out, you go back to that Super Bowl against San Francisco. You've got this, I think it was 4th down. You've got everything covered. And then all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes just throws the ball up and Tyreek Hill goes and gets it. The Chiefs score, they steal that game from the 49ers. It's just little things like that they can do with all that talent on offense. It's what everybody's going to say, but I just don't think there's anything else to say. It really is just those weapons that have been together for so long with that coaching staff together. It just causes so many problems.
Yeah, you can't simulate what Patrick Mahomes can do in practice, because he's kind of a one-of-a-kind kind of guy. So, yeah, I get that. Dan Labbe and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, which rookies are the Browns counting on, and how has Baker Mayfield looked in training camp and preseason? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns football with Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Dan Labbe. So Pro Football Focus, analytics-driven website, ranked the highest and lowest rookies from the Browns preseason. 60 is average. Highest graded rookie in the preseason, Richard LeCounte, 75.7. That grades out to be starter quality. Lowest was Marvin Wilson, 29.9. That was the tackle that the Browns paid a little extra as an undrafted free agent. They did not sign him back to the practice squad after he was let go on cutdown day. So Dan Labbe, Richard LeCounte grades out as a starter. He looks like he can play, and they got him in the 5th round.
Yeah, you know, to me, this is an example of the Browns betting on kind of talent, right? Betting on upside and betting on talent. They did it with Donovan Peoples-Jones, who just tested through the roof and was a highly recruited kid. And Richard LeCounte was sort of the same thing. There was a battle for him when he was in high school. I can't remember if he was a 4 or 5 star, but he was a very highly rated recruit. He ends up going to Georgia. Had he not gotten in that bike accident his last year there, he probably would have been a guy who would have gone higher. But I think there was some concerns about his health. But you know, Andrew Berry and this front office are going to bet on testing. They're going to bet on athleticism. They're going to bet on that upside. And with LeCounte, it seems like it's going to work out. And he becomes an important figure if Grant Delpit can't go early in the year, or even if at the end of the season, when you've got to make some tough decisions on a guy like a Ronnie Harrison who heads to free agency, you know, Richard LeCounte becomes a guy on a really reasonable contract for the next 3 years after this year that you're going to be able to plug into that defense and help you still have a good unit out there.
People who watch the show regularly are probably getting sick of me making this point, but I'm going to make it again anyway. The way that Andrew Berry and the front office are finding guys in the 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th round that can play, it's impressive, and it indicates to me they know the quote-unquote type of player that they're looking for. They're not going to ask him to do X, but he can do A, B, and C, and that's what we need in our system. Would you agree? Because it's refreshing to find the Browns getting these guys late in drafts. It's usually teams like the Ravens and the Steelers, who are perennially good, that find guys late in the draft that can play for them.
I mean, you nailed it. When you know exactly what you want and you know what you want a player to do in your system, you can identify exactly the type of player you want. And so there's kind of two things that work here. The first is that part of it and that ability to say, hey, this is a 5th or 6th round pick, or, you know, they haven't made a 7th round pick yet, but I'm sure they'd approach it the same way. We want guys who test well, who are athletic, who have a bunch of potential upside. We want those guys, and we know how they fit in this defense or on the offense. And then the other part of it is this roster has been built up. You don't need these guys to come in and start right away for you. You know, I asked Kevin Stefanski, they kept every draft pick from the last 2 years on their 53-man roster this year. And I asked him, is that sort of a philosophy that you're not going to give up on guys? You're going to draft and develop. And kind of said, yeah, I mean, we're going to trust our scouting process. We're going to trust what we do. And then it's our jobs as coaches to bring these guys in and develop them. And I think this organization is going to be patient with their draft picks and let them grow.
So who are the guys that the Browns are counting on early in 2021 who are rookies? Who are some of the guys that they're expecting to contribute, early this year?
Well, this is kind of the nice thing with their roster set. I mean, you're looking at Greg Newsome, you're looking at Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Maybe LeCount becomes a guy they have to count on, but I don't know if they're going to have to. It just depends on the health of Grant Delpit and how guys stay healthy in that safety room. A guy like James Hudson, he didn't look great in the preseason, but it doesn't necessarily matter because he doesn't need to go out there week one. And the only way you see James Hudson is if something goes wrong or if somebody gets hurt on that offensive line. So you've got him here to sort of develop and redshirt, at least as much as you can redshirt in the NFL. So I really think it's those top two guys, maybe LeCount, and then Anthony Schwartz, is, of course, because of that speed, is so intriguing. But I don't know, he's still got some work to do. And of course, the other guy I have to mention is Demetric Felton. But again, you're not counting on him to carry the ball 20 times a game. He's going to be your kick returner. He's going to do some things where you mix it up on offense. So it's kind of pick and choose there. But the top two are definitely those first two guys they picked. Yeah,
and to your point about Schwartz, they knew they needed some speed to stretch the defense, both laterally, wide and deep. And so there's a skill set that the Browns need that they can use from Anthony Schwartz. All right, how has Baker Mayfield looked to you in camp?
He's looked like a guy that, I wouldn't say he blew me out of the water with how he played, but he just looks like a guy that's comfortable in where he is in his career and sort of understanding he's the starting quarterback. He'll be the opening day starter for the third straight. He did 40-some straight games going back to that Jets game in week 3 in 2018. So he just seems comfortable. I try not to put too much stock in Baker Mayfield, the practice player, because I don't think that's when he's at his best. I think sometimes, I heard a story about Aaron Rodgers once that sometimes you'll watch Aaron Rodgers in practice and he'll do something and it won't look great, but it's because he's experimenting. It's because he's trying to figure out, can this guy go get the football for me? Can this guy do this? So I think you have to be careful with some of that stuff. When the lights come on for Baker, that's when you really judge him. And we saw it against Atlanta, even in a preseason game. Little rusty maybe on that first drive, but then we see on the second drive, he makes that great throw to Kadarius Hodge, doesn't have an incompletion on that drive at all. And we kind of come away feeling like, all right, Baker's ready. So he wasn't great in practice, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't have to be great in practice. That's not where he shines. He gets the work done that he needs to do so that when the lights come on, he can be the player we know he is.
Yeah, I would agree. That second series, it was like, boy, he just looked comfortable. Comfortable is a good way to, it looks second nature to him. There was nothing he didn't have to translate anything. He wasn't thinking. He was going out and executing the offense. All right, Dan Labbe, before we let you go, 8 free agents and their best fits. This is from Bleacher Report. They have a safety, Clinton Dix, listed as best fit for the Browns. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and they are a little thin at corner and in that secondary. Not that they don't have talented guys, but they don't have a ton of depth sitting there. A.J. Green is a guy they kept who was an undrafted rookie last year and certainly made a jump when we saw him in camp and in the preseason. So, yeah, I mean, if there's a room for him at the right price, I think that's a position they would look at. But I don't know that they're going to address that position with a big name or a name people know. I think they're going to continue to watch the waiver wire, continue to see how the bottom of the rosters churn across the NFL. I don't see them being real aggressive right now and going out and signing a name you really know like that.
Yeah, I think it says a lot that they brought back, most of their practice squad were guys that were in camp, and Kevan Stefanski said he wanted to keep all of them. He was pretty much telling the truth because they brought a bunch of them back. So I think, again, that kind of indicates how they know what they want player-wise, skill sets.
Yeah, and it's just great to have that stability. I mean, you spend all this time with these guys, some of them going back to a month in the spring you spend with them. And then, they report to camp at the end of July, and you hate to put all that time into guys and just have to send them packing and not see them again. Now, some guys, maybe they just aren't, maybe it's just not meant to be, right? I mean, this is the NFL. These are the best players in the world. But, if a guy shows you at least a little something and you put all this time and effort into him, I do think this organization and this coaching staff values this idea of really being able to continue working with guys and developing them into the types of players that fit here.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. After this week, it's game prep. Long weekend, and then it starts Kansas City week. Dan, as always, man, thanks for the time and the insight.
Yep, Chiefs week is here. Thanks for all of it.
All right, Dan Labbe, make sure you read them. Pages of the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast will join us straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football. Kevin Stefanski talked about how ironic it is. Browns ended the season against the Chiefs. They start this season against the Chiefs. Question is there any carryover? Is there anything that the Browns learned from that playoff loss that they can use in week one?
It's definitely a new game, Zach. I mean, we have a lot of the same players. They have a lot of the same players. We have the same coaches. They have the same coaches. You don't pick up where you left off, so we are certainly anticipating they're going to show us things that we haven't seen throughout the preseason. I know they expect the same from us. So, but of course there will be similarity because a lot of the faces are the same.
Let's welcome in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. And Kevin, the one thing I think the Browns have a little bit of an advantage, they have so many new guys on the defensive side of the ball that haven't really played. I don't think the Chiefs have a good idea of some of the things that the Browns could do defensively. Now, having said that, Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, which kind of equalizes everything.
It does. Having Patrick Mahomes does equalize everything when you have arguably the best quarterback in the league right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, you said that the Kansas City Chiefs don't know what the Browns could be bringing on defense. The Browns may not know what they can bring on defense yet either, because they are still working through chemistry, and it may take a couple weeks for this defense to really find its groove and find how all of these parts fit best under Joe Woods' system and what he wants to do and how he wants to utilize the skill sets on this defense. If it does take a couple weeks, that's okay, because we saw what happened last year after game one. Browns still go 11-5, but you don't want it to take too long if it is going to be a process, because you do want to hit the ground running as best as you can if you want to establish yourself towards the top, if not at the top of the AFC.
The one thing I would say is the Browns defense has speed now that they didn't have in that playoff game. to at least deal with, the Travis Kelce's and the Tariq Hills and the Patrick Mahomes. So they're a little bit better equipped just physically from the physical skills needed to play that team. I don't think anybody could argue that.
And I don't think you could argue the fact that this defense should be able to get off the field on a 3rd down and 14 against Patrick Mahomes or a backup quarterback in that situation that the Browns found themselves in that playoff game. And I think also not only the speed, but I think the leadership is a lot more present. The vocal leadership is a lot more present on that defense. And I know the Browns kind of talked about it after that playoff loss, and some, media pundits and fans as well brought it up that if they had that vocal leader or kind of someone that was established vocally on that defense a little bit more last year, after Myles Garrett gets that sack on 2nd down to force it into 3rd down and 14, getting everybody back in the huddle and knowing we got one more play to give our offense and Baker Mayfield one more chance, and we have all the confidence in the world that they can get it done. We just have to give them that chance. They didn't get it done. I think this defense, looking a whole lot faster, is going to sound a whole lot louder too, and that's a good thing for a leadership standpoint on this team and in this organization.
So CBSSports.com has offensive bounce-back candidates, and one of them, the Browns' Odell Beckham Jr., a guy that could not go in that playoff game, and a skill set that the Browns' offense could definitely use. Odell Beckham Jr. brings to that offensive huddle.
Yeah, and a guy that can take the top off the defense, or at least force there to be a little bit more room for the playmakers like Jarvis Landry and maybe a possession receiver as well, like Hollywood Higgins, even to a certain extent Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then your running backs coming out of the backfield. Give them a little bit more space to operate with. Defenses were kind of able to at times keep everything in front of them as if it was 3rd and long at all times, and the team was getting themselves into trouble with penalties. It's just they didn't have that speedster that could make one big catch down the sideline and be gone. Now they hope that Donovan Peoples-Jones can be that young piece that supplements OBJ as well, but you got to have that experienced veteran in there. And if Odell Beckham Jr. can get back to the talented player that we all know that he is and avoid injury, knocking on wood, of course, then I fully agree with all of these bounce-back player, comeback player of the year nominee type elements. He has that kind of skill set and can have that kind of impact this season.
All right, CBSSports.com. Also, NFL players who could shift the balance of power in 2021. So we've got quarterback Carson Wentz. Not sure about that. Jameis Winston, okay, maybe. And then for the Browns, Jadeveon Clowney. Now, if Clowney's right, yeah.
Yeah, because Clowney on the other side of Garrett, you get the Clowney that he was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. You get that kind of Clowney or something close to that, 75 to 80% of that on the other side of Garrett. Now that opens up Myles Garrett. And we've been talking about this all off season, but 2 guys that can complement each other on each side of the line. Just having one that puts all those chips and stunts and double teams, triple teams from the offensive line, adding in tight ends or running backs, that makes all of those schemes a lot easier when you know it's just one guy you have to key on. If Clowney can start having an impact and really make offensive units around the league be concerned as they develop their plan to keep their quarterbacks upright and keep their offense moving, that just adds to the speed and the power that this defense can really bring this year, and why they brought a guy like that in with the high upside or big risk, but also big reward.
And the other thing about Clowney, don't focus so much on his sack total. If he can help shut down the run, and he's really good against the run, it's overlooked because he was the first pick in the draft. People kind of focus on that sack total. If he shuts down the run and is the best version of Jadeveon Clowney, not necessarily the number 1 guy that was picked overall, this defensive line is going to be a handful.
Absolutely, because if you can stop the run, that's how offenses get defenses on their heels to start with. In a passing league, if you can get your running game going, and we know the Browns are a running offense, but if other teams get their rushing attack going against us as they have in the past, gets the defense on the heels, and that makes trying to, get off the field on third down that much more difficult. This team needs to get off the field when it matters most and on third down situations and even fourth down situations. I believe they were one of the worst, if not the worst, giving up 27 of 32 fourth down opportunities to other opponents. You got to get off the field at those times and get those stops.
Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, one of the NFL.com analysts projecting the Browns in the Super Bowl. We'll also see what could derail the Browns from an outstanding 2021. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns football with Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. So, Kevan, NFL.com's Joe Thomas, former Brown, picks the Browns to win the Super Bowl over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Are you buying it?
I mean, if Joe Thomas is saying that a future Hall of Famer, you kind of have to try to buy into it. But, a team that went to the divisional round last year has higher aspirations, if not a Super Bowl, at least to the conference championship. Now, is this team Super Bowl or bust? I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but this team really has some answers or some questions to answer. We see how talented they are on paper. You and I have talked about that several times, Dave, of how talented this team looks like they can be. And we've seen elements of that at practice, the joint practices, some of the preseason with some of the depth that they have. But they're going to have to perform. And it's different when you get to the regular season when the lights are brightest. Each week matters. And if they can answer those questions week by week and against some of the better opponents in their own division, maybe even starting with Kansas City, the best team in the AFC or arguably the best team in the AFC right now, and really get off to a good start, then those kind of, predictions are, you start buying those a little more and more. But it's hard to go against and say you don't buy anything that a future Hall of Famer, let alone a Browns legend like Joe Thomas, says on live air.
I would say that, certainly they should be in the conversation to be in the Super Bowl. And at this point in where they are, getting ready to go into week preparation for week one, that's all you can ask. They should be in the conversation. They've got to earn being in the conversation. All right, for the Browns to get to and possibly win the Super Bowl, who has to play well? Doesn't have to necessarily be one. Give me a couple of guys that you think really have to get after it.
We mentioned one of them already. Jadeveon Clowney is going to have to play well, and you said it perfectly. The sack numbers don't have to be astronomical Myles Garrett is going to be the one that's probably going to put up numbers. If they're going to be astronomical sack numbers, it's going to be Myles Garrett. But if Clowney can have that impact along the defensive line to allow Myles Garrett to work, he can get to the quarterback and finish from time to time, but also help in the run game. It's all going to start up front. So Jadeveon Clowney would be one. On the other side, it's the other guy we talked about as well, Odell Beckham Jr. I think in order for this team to really not just be in the conversation, but be able to answer the question, why not us, with it should be us and it is us, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to have a big year for this team. And again, it doesn't have to be these astronomical touchdown numbers or yardage numbers. It's having the impact and doing the little things, blocking, catching those short 3-yard, 4-yard passes for first downs, maybe on a third down, making the crucial plays that keeps a drive alive, keeps a game alive to go win it, and keeps this season alive for the Vince Lombardi Trophy aspirations that every NFL team has, but especially those guys out there in Berea.
All right, so let's turn this on the other side. What could derail this season for the Browns? What would be a nightmare scenario in your mind?
I mean, I go right to it, and I hate to say it, but it's one thing right at the top is injuries. Injuries can really derail this team. Now, they have a lot more depth to kind of counteract some of those injury issues that we've seen in the past. When number ones went down, it was almost like you were going to our number ones being other teams 2 or 3s, and so we're kind of going to our traditional NFL 4s when those guys would come in. Now you have actual depth, so that can help you, but you don't want to see the injury bug. And the other thing is getting off to a rough start in terms of bad habits. They were very good in the preseason about limiting penalties, limiting the mental mistakes, pre-snap penalties, those kind of things that kill a drive or kind of allow a team to go on their own offensive drive. If you're jumping off sides, those little things that go a long way and can help determine the outcome of every single game. Those, I would say, injuries and mental mistake habits becoming a problem would be the 2 main derailers for a Super Bowl run for the Cleveland Browns in 2021.
I think the guy that can least afford to lose is Myles Garrett. I think they could, and this is nothing against Baker Mayfield, I think they could tread water and do just fine with Case Keenum if they needed to. I think Case Keenum could win big games for him if they needed to. But if Myles Garrett goes down on the defensive side of the ball, I think that kind of moves things into areas you don't want to get to defensively.
Yeah, and you said it. You don't want to. It's not any disrespect to Baker Mayfield, but Myles Garrett is the guy. If you're going to ask me, if you want to pick one guy that this team can't lose, I'm right there with you, Dave. It's Myles Garrett. Baker Mayfield was number 2, but there's a reason why they brought in Case Keenum. I'm picking Baker Mayfield over Case Keenum every single day if you have the option. But if there was that unfortunate injury, Case Keenum, knowing this system, knowing Kevin Stefanski and his language, and being around these guys for his second year as well, so everybody feeling comfortable around Case and Case around everybody else, that gives you a little bit more, I guess, calmness about the fact that, what if, the what ifs that everybody wants to talk about. Myles Garrett, who's next? Until Jadeveon Clowney answers the questions, can he help Myles Garrett? We don't know that he can be a replacement for that and be that number 1 guy either. Myles Garrett just cannot be lost this season for this team to make a miraculous and, a run that every fan has been looking for a long time, especially since those late 80s teams where they were so close and just couldn't get over the hump to the Super Bowl and try to go win it.
Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. As always, Kevin, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Always enjoy the time, Dave. Always enjoy the conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, Kevan Arnold, make sure you listen to him, Voice of the Land podcast. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will have Monday off. Enjoy the great Labor Day weekend. Back at it Tuesday, Mary Kay Cabot, the scheduled guest. We will also have another one. We're still working in the phones to get our second half guest for Tuesday. It is game week, everyone. Browns getting ready for the Chiefs next weekend. Make sure you join us Tuesday on Sports4CLE. Have a great holiday weekend. We'll see you Tuesday.